The first time Grace reached for my hand that night, I thought she was only half asleep. The tiny apartment in Portland, Oregon had fallen completely silent after one of the hardest weeks either of us had ever lived through. Rain tapped gently against the window while the old heater struggled against the November cold. I had agreed to stay over because she had just buried the last member of her immediate family, and neither of us wanted her to wake up alone in an empty home. When her fingers found mine and carefully guided my hand to rest against her waist, my heart raced with confusion, fear, and concern. It wasn't romance that filled the room. It was something far heavier, the desperate need of someone terrified that if they closed their eyes, they would wake up completely alone again. Before we continue, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe people deserve hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories that remind us how powerful simple acts of love can truly be. Grace and I had met 3 years earlier while volunteering at a neighborhood food pantry. I was the quiet one who preferred organizing shelves instead of talking, while Grace somehow knew every visitor's name within a week. She carried an energy that made strangers feel like lifelong friends, but beneath her bright smile she quietly carried burdens very few people ever noticed. Her father had battled illness for years, her mother had spent every day caring for him until her own health began to fail, and Grace worked 2 jobs simply to keep the household together. She rarely complained. She simply kept moving, believing tomorrow would somehow be kinder than today. Then life seemed to collapse all at once. Within a single year she lost both parents, exhausted her savings, and nearly lost the apartment she had grown up in. Friends visited during the funeral and disappeared afterward, returning to their own busy lives. I stayed because I couldn't ignore how empty the silence had become once everyone else had gone home. Every evening after work I brought groceries, helped organize paperwork, cooked simple dinners, and reminded her that surviving one difficult day was enough. The night we shared that small bed happened only because her living room furniture had already been sold to help pay overdue bills. There was only one mattress left in the apartment. She apologized repeatedly, embarrassed by how much life had changed, but I honestly didn't care. Friends help each other through uncomfortable moments. That was what mattered. As the hours passed, I realized the trembling in her breathing wasn't caused by the cold. She had been waking from nightmares ever since losing her parents. Every time she startled awake, she would instinctively reach toward the empty space where someone she loved used to be. Without speaking, her hand searched until it found mine. When she gently rested it against her side, her breathing slowly steadied. It wasn't about affection in the way people often assume. It was about reassurance. It was the silent confirmation that another human being was still there. That single night changed how I understood loneliness. Before then, I believed loneliness meant being physically alone. Grace taught me that true loneliness begins when someone believes nobody would notice if they disappeared tomorrow. That realization stayed with me long after sunrise. The following months were filled with small victories instead of dramatic miracles. Grace accepted counseling through her church. The volunteers at the pantry quietly organized a fundraiser without telling her until enough money had been collected to cover several months of rent. An elderly neighbor began leaving homemade soup outside her apartment every Sunday afternoon. One family offered her a better job at their local bookstore after seeing how patiently she had helped children during a charity event. None of these gestures solved everything overnight, but together they rebuilt something much more valuable than financial stability. They rebuilt trust that goodness still existed. Watching Grace slowly smile again reminded me that healing rarely arrives through one extraordinary event. More often, it grows from dozens of ordinary people choosing compassion every single day. Months later she invited everyone who had stood beside her during that difficult season to a simple backyard picnic. There were folding chairs, homemade sandwiches, children playing tag across the grass, and laughter that sounded impossible only a year earlier. Looking around, I realized we had become the family life had taken from her. Not by replacing those she lost, but by refusing to let grief have the final word. If this story has touched your heart so far, please consider supporting the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and sharing it with someone who may need a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can completely change another person's life. Before this story comes to an end, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment telling us about a friend, neighbor, or stranger whose kindness helped you through a difficult season, because your story might become the encouragement someone else desperately needs today. Years have passed since that rainy night in Portland, yet I still remember the quiet moment when Grace placed my hand on her waist, not because it was dramatic, but because it revealed a truth I will never forget. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer another person isn't advice, money, or perfect words. Sometimes it's simply our presence, our patience, and our willingness to stay when everyone else has already gone. In a world that often rushes past quiet pain, choosing to remain beside someone can become the beginning of their healing. And every time I think back to that night, I remember that hope doesn't always arrive with grand speeches or impossible miracles. Sometimes hope arrives as a steady heartbeat reminding another heart that it no longer has to face the darkness alone.